the dark backstage of the Eternal City. Rome, known worldwide as the Eternal City, cradle of the Roman Empire and symbol of Western power, is also the epicenter of one of the oldest and most complex criminal organizations in the world, the Italian Mafia, especially the Ndrangheta ***, responsible for unprecedented infiltrations throughout the European continent. While tourists from all over the world visit the Colosseum, the Vatican, and pizza restaurants, few realize that behind the tourist facade, a network of illegal power controls entire sectors of the economy, from the food industry to finance, politics, and culture. Italy is much more than pizza, fashion, and soccer. It's a country where organized crime masquerades as family tradition. The Ndrangheta, which originated in Calabria, today surpasses even the Sicilian Mafia in power and influence, with an estimated revenue of 53 billion euros a year, more than many Fortune 500 companies. This organization operates in all parts of the world, controlling international drug routes, human trafficking, money laundering, and even the high-tech and construction sectors. Its leaders, called godfathers, are almost untouchable figures, protected by a network of omerta, code of silence, that has permeated Italian society for centuries. But organized crime is just the tip of the iceberg. The Italian Catholic Church, for example, is home to corruption, sexual abuse, and money laundering scandals that go far beyond isolated cases. The Vatican is accused of being a tax haven and hiding place for international criminals and corrupt politicians, all under the cloak of diplomatic immunity. The Vatican Bank has already been involved in millionaire money laundering and fraud scandals, with direct links to mafia organizations and bankrupt states. In everyday life, Italian families are held hostage by a system where jobs and opportunities depend on loyalty to specific groups. Small business owners pay tolls to organize crime in order to operate, and politicians are financed by criminal factions in exchange for legal favors and judicial shielding. Children learn from an early age that talking too much can cost the entire family their lives. Italian soccer, world famous, with clubs like Juventus, Milan, and Inter, hides dangerous links to organized crime money laundering. Teams are used to launder fortunes, manipulate bets, and control organized supporters who function as private armies for criminal groups. Players and managers are coerced into taking part in bribery schemes and sports fraud. The Italian media is also under the control of shady interests. Journalists investigating organized crime and corruption are threatened, assaulted, or killed. The most famous case was that of journalist Paolo Borsellino, murdered in 1992 for exposing links between the mafia and politics. News of scandals is hushed up by powerful groups, and the population is kept in the dark about the real extent of the problem. Education in Italy is paralyzed by constant strikes, lack of investment, and corruption in the distribution of resources. Public schools are neglected, while private schools, attended by the elite, receive public funds through fraudulent schemes. Teachers are bribed to change the grades of students from powerful families, perpetuating a cycle of privilege. The Italian justice system is slow, bureaucratic, and easily corrupted. Cases against mobsters can go on for decades without resolution, while victims are intimidated or bought off from testifying. Judges and prosecutors live under armed escort because of the risk of assassination. Tourism, one of the pillars of the Italian economy, is affected by overpricing, money laundering, and the exploitation of immigrant workers. Hotels, restaurants, and hostels are controlled by cartels that evade taxes and pay miserable wages. Tourists often don't realize that they are feeding an illegal economy that exploits the most vulnerable. Family businesses, a symbol of Italian culture, are often fronts for illegal activities. Bakeries, markets, and clothes stores serve as sales points for drugs, weapons, and smuggled goods. Family members are recruited for key positions in the criminal structure, ensuring loyalty and silence. Italian public health, once a model for the world, is collapsing due to budget cuts, corruption, and mismanagement. Hospitals face shortages of medicines, obsolete equipment, and overcrowding. Professionals are bribed to prioritize patients from influential families, while ordinary people die in queues. A culture of fear permeates Italian society, where reporting wrongdoing can cost you your life. Victims of organized crime often don't seek justice for fear of retaliation. Entire communities live under the control of criminal groups, with police and authorities compromised or inoperative. Italy's future is threatened by this parallel power structure that is eroding democratic institutions. Young people migrate en masse to other countries in search of opportunity and security, while the elderly are abandoned in overcrowded and neglected asylums. Subscribe to the channel for the next blocks. It's going to be an even deeper dive into Italy's secrets. While tourists from all over the world travel to Italy fascinated by Renaissance art, handmade pizza, Milan fashion, and soccer in the Olympic stadiums, few imagine what lies behind the smokescreen of the Dolce Vita. The second chapter of this itinerary delves deep into the bowels of the Vatican State, the underworld of museums, luxurious clothing, and kitchens that prepare dishes that have enchanted the world, revealing a country where beauty and corruption are frighteningly intertwined. In the heart of Rome, a few meters separate the Colosseum, a symbol of glory and power, from the walls of the Vatican, a truly autonomous state with its own ruler, the Pope. Police, banking system, and, above all, secrets that few dare tell. The Vatican is not only the spiritual center of Catholicism, but also one of the most enigmatic institutions on the planet. For centuries, this microstate has amassed incalculable wealth, political power, and global influence, functioning as a veritable hub of parallel power. The Holy See owns hundreds of properties around the world, from Renaissance palaces to luxury hotels, and its role in international negotiations is often underestimated. The Vatican Bank, known as the IOR, Institute for Works of Religion, was once considered the most secretive bank in the world, a reputation built on piles of financial scandals that marked the 20th and 21st centuries. Independent investigators, journalists, and even international agencies have uncovered evidence of money laundering, fraud, influence, peddling, and even participation in financial scams involving billions of euros. The IOR operated for decades as an opaque institution, often defying international regulators and foreign governments, protected by diplomatic immunity and the unquestioning secrecy of the Church. What would you do if you discovered that even God's direct representative on Earth can manipulate the fate of entire nations with a simple signature? More disturbing than the financial scandals, however, are the reports involving political assassinations, mysterious disappearances of priests, diplomats, and even the Pope himself. Documents leaked in recent years suggest that the Vatican's history is littered with suspicious deaths, aborted investigations, and bought silences. One of the most controversial episodes was the murder of Italian banker Roberto Calvi, whose body was found hanging under London's famous Bankers Bridge in the early 1980s. A decade later, the Amato affair, involving spies and the alleged embezzlement of millions of dollars from the IOR, became one of the greatest mysteries of the 20th century, unsolved to this day. The Vatican's influence extends far beyond Rome. Italian bishops and cardinals are an integral part of local geopolitics, influencing elections, economic agreements, and even the appointment of judges and prosecutors. In many cases, the simple support or spiritual blessing of a prelate can mean the success or failure of a political project or a business career. The link between the Church and the Italian state is as old as the nation's history, and to this day defines the country's course, often for the worse. Scandals such as VatiLeaks, which revealed the existence of secret dossiers on homosexuality, corruption, and betrayal within the Holy See, show that the Vatican is a world apart, where even sanctity can be negotiated. Pizza, Italy's gastronomic symbol, is also shrouded in mystery and controversy. The birthplace of Neapolitan pizza, Southern Italy is dominated by traditional families who vie for control of the best raw materials, the best ovens, and even the best chefs. Behind the family recipes and culinary traditions that delight the world, there's an underground economy driven by extortion, product smuggling, and money laundering. Pizzerias are often used as fronts for illicit businesses, and even the quality of the San Marzano tomato can be seen as a matter of life and death for those who try to challenge the established order. The tradition of the pizzuolo, a central character in Neapolitan culture, is far from just a matter of gastronomic pride. It is also, in many cases, synonymous with resistance against a system of pressures where entrepreneurs who refuse to submit to the rules of dominant groups can be victims of sabotage, boycotts, and even violence. In 2017, one of Naples' most famous pizzaiolos, Ciro Salvo, had to close his pizzeria after receiving threats from groups linked to the Camorra, a criminal organization that has even controlled the supply of flour to the city's pizzerias. Stories of chefs disappearing after trying to create competition are common in the underworld of Italy's big cities. But why is pizza, a symbol of joy and hospitality, at the center of so many conflicts? Because, in addition to its symbolic value, this delicacy generates billions of euros a year, not just in Italy, but all over the world. The pizza market is a fantastic money laundering machine where counterfeit bills, illegal profits, and hidden fortunes are diluted in dough, tomato sauce, and cheese. Large chains of pizzerias act as a veil for criminal operations, whether it's the illegal import of ingredients or the concealment of capital from organized crime. In the world of art, Italy is home to some of the most valuable creations on the planet. Works by Leonardo, Michelangelo, Caravaggio, and Botticelli are national treasures and attract collectors from all over the world. But at the same time, the country is the main stage for a clandestine art market that moves obscene amounts of money. Trafficking in works of art is one of the most profitable activities of Italian organized crime, involving theft, forgery, and international smuggling. Renowned galleries, museums, and even the Vatican itself have been cited in international money laundering schemes, where valuable paintings and sculptures serve as bargaining chips between mafiosi, politicians, and international bankers. Recovering stolen works is one of the Italian government's main battles, but the work of the Carabinieri, Italian police, is often hampered by bureaucracy, corruption, and economic pressures. Fraudulent restorations, doctored reports, and museums buy pieces of dubious origin for astronomical prices are common practices in the sector. What many people still don't know is that restoring works of art can be a lucrative business for criminal groups who control everything from analysis laboratories to international auctions. The theft of Caravaggio's paintings, the frescoes of Pompeii, and even the famous painting The Last Supper have already been investigated as cases of international smuggling involving militias, politicians, and even high-ranking members of the church. Italian fashion is another jewel of national culture, whose fame has resonated for decades. In the world's major capitals, Milan, known as the capital of fashion, is home to major brands such as Versace, Gucci, Armani, and Prada, as well as countless independent designers. Behind the glamour, however, there is an underworld of labor trafficking, bribery, money laundering, and controlling cartels that dominate the entire production chain. Large luxury clothing manufacturers have already been accused of mistreating employees, using immigrant labor in precarious conditions, and even exploiting children in poor countries to produce fabrics and accessories for the European market. The low price paid to textile workers contrasts with the exorbitant prices charged in the luxury stores in Milan's Piazza Monte Napoleon. Have you ever wondered how much suffering goes into that haute couture dress you dream of wearing? Tourism, which generates a significant portion of Italy's GDP, also does not escape the hands of organized crime and corruption. Large hotel chains are used to launder money. Overbilling schemes are common in the construction of large resorts, and even tour guides can be involved in human trafficking schemes. sex tourism, and the theft of historical artifacts. Hotels, restaurants, and souvenir stores often become fronts for tax evasion operations, where the real amounts don't match those invoiced in official systems. Immigrant workers, mostly from Africa and the Middle East, are exploited and kept in slave-like conditions, while sustaining the glamour of the country's great destinations. The Italian media, which could be a counterpoint to parallel power, often becomes an ally or hostage to hidden interests. The tradition of investigative journalism is strong, but reporters who touch on sensitive topics, such as links between politicians and the mafia, or corruption in the justice system, are often threatened, imprisoned, or persecuted. The murder of journalist Paolo Borsellino, killed in a bomb attack in 1992, is just one of the emblematic cases of repression of the independent press. Today, many media outlets are treated with suspicion, as coverage of scandals is often suppressed by economic and political pressures. Soccer, the national passion of the Italian people, where historic teams like Juventus, Milan, Inter, Roma, and Napoli have won international glory, is also entangled in the same web of manipulation, crime, and power. Not just match fixing, but money laundering, player trafficking, corruption of referees, and links to organized crime are part of the daily life of the big clubs. Cases like the Calciopoli scandal, revealed in 2006, exposed fixing schemes involving the management of big clubs, referees, businessmen, and, of course, criminal organizations. Organized supporters groups, which should be mere support groups, function as veritable urban militias, responsible for debt collection, extortion of players, and even executions for hire. Italian soccer, despite its European and world titles, has never been able to completely free itself from the dirty game of the shadows who manipulate behind the scenes. Are you a fan of an Italian club? What if you discovered that your favorite team's success might be based on marked cards? The Italian justice system, however much it tries to modernize itself, still suffers from slowness, bureaucracy, and corruption. Cases against mafia bosses can last decades, and many convicted of serious crimes continue to freely control their empires from behind bars. Prosecutors and judges who stand out in the fight against organized crime live under permanent armed escort, and entire families are moved to distant cities to avoid reprisals. Justice is slow, partial, and often permeated by political and economic interests. Spectacular trials are just the tip of the iceberg of a judicial system that, in many cases, serves power more than the law. Still, in the public sphere, education and health, essential pillars of human dignity, are often neglected, while resources are diverted to overpriced works, fraudulent tenders, and projects that never get off the ground. Public schools and hospitals often lack basic supplies. Teachers and doctors are subjected to political pressure, and students and patients from less influential families wait months for decent care. The gulf between the elites who attend private educational institutions and the ordinary citizens who depend on public education only widens as the state purposely scraps essential services. Technology and innovation, which could propel the country into the future, are also contaminated by the game of interests. Promising startups are absorbed by large conglomerates linked to the mafia or succumb to bureaucracy and the misappropriation of funds. Talented professionals migrate en masse to countries in Europe, the USA, and Asia, seeking work, dignity, and a future far from the oppression of the parallel system that dominates their homeland. The Italian brain, a storehouse of engineers, scientists, and artists, is exported to other nations, enriching foreign cultures while Italy finds itself increasingly short of creative minds. Finally, the international media still sells the image of an idyllic Italy with bucolic landscapes, extraordinary cuisine, and fascinating history. But the reality is much darker. Behind every photograph of a smiling pizzaiolo, every fashion window in Milan, every goal celebrated in the stadiums, there is a machine of corruption, violence, and inequality that dictates the rules of everyday life. The fight for justice, transparency and freedom is a daily battle waged by brave individuals who, despite the fear, continue to denounce and resist. In the next block, we'll delve into the intricacies of modern organized crime in Italy, exploring how the Ndrangheta, the Camorra, Cosa Nostra, and other organizations have adapted their strategies for the 21st century. We'll discover how globalization has extended the reach of the Italian underworld, making it a partner of international cartels, dictatorships, and megacorporations. Follow along and find out what secrets are still to come as you journey behind the scenes. In Italy, modern organized crime, when shadows dominate the light. In the 21st century, Italian organized crime has partially abandoned its rural traditions to reinvent itself as one of the most sophisticated forces in global crime. Ndrangheta, Camorra, Cosa Nostra, and Sacra Corona Unita form a flexible, multinational consortium, a kind of underworld holding company that, behind the folklore, moves the economy, manipulates markets, and challenges the concept of national sovereignty. The Ndrangheta, considered the richest of the Italian mafias a decade ago, controls more than 80% of the cocaine circulating in Europe. Its methods have evolved. Today, contracts are closed by conference call. Investments are made via cryptocurrency, and money is laundered through works of contemporary art and online sports betting. Blood ties remain crucial, but have given way to the use of specialists, lawyers, accountants, programmers, and even international hackers are co-opted to keep the empire safe from investigation. International trafficking is no longer limited to drugs or weapons. People, refugees, immigrants, victims of war, are used as currency to negotiate with African, Asian, and Latin American mafias. Human trafficking routes pass through Italian ports, facilitated by political deals and corruption in strategic sectors of the civil service. Recently, major police operations have exposed schemes to recycle public funds for the reconstruction of cities hit by earthquakes. Phantom companies linked to mafia clans took on public contracts worth billions of euros, penalizing real victims and perpetuating tragedies for their own benefit. What if your tax money ended up in the pockets of criminal clans while entire cities face starvation, abandonment, and destruction? Organized crime has infiltrated police forces and the judiciary. Police officers, inspectors, and prosecutors are bribed or threatened, and the families of civil servants are blackmailed. In Naples and Palermo, neighborhoods are patrolled by mafia soldiers who impose curfews, demand protection for shopkeepers, and offer parallel justice, which is faster and more lethal than the state itself. Italy's shadow economy is a monster of continental proportions. Hotels, restaurants, construction companies, and even agricultural systems are used as conduits to hide illicit profits. They're transferred via tax havens in Switzerland, Malta, Luxembourg, and the Cayman Islands. In the last 5 years alone, allegations have amounted to more than 100 billion euros in undeclared assets. Would you trust a country whose cultural greatness is financed by money from trafficking, exploitation, and killing? Organized crime also acts as a social innovator where the state is absent. It distributes food, settles neighbor disputes, pays for funerals, and thereby creates loyalty and fear. Children learn the mafia's codes before they learn to read, and many young people see the world of crime as the only route up the social ladder. Although technology and globalization have modernized business, terror and physical repression are still central. Weapons. In the digital market, mobsters invest in cryptocurrency startups, fintechs, and artificial intelligence, not to innovate, but to launder money, hack banks, manipulate online betting, markets, and sabotage financial investigations. Territorial control of the underworld consolidates social practices of segregation. Areas belonging to rival clans are the scene of armed conflicts, while pacified neighborhoods see their schools, hospitals, and infrastructure taken over by projects that serve to perpetuate criminal influence. The impact on culture is profound. Music, films, and even fashion incorporate symbols of the underworld, glamorizing the figure of the mafioso at once a local hero and a national villain. Series such as Gamara have gained international notoriety by faithfully portraying everyday violence, corruption, and the cycle of fear and loyalty. It's not uncommon to find stories of honest businessmen who, by challenging the mafia, see their businesses destroyed, their reputations tarnished, and their families threatened. Some flee, others resist. Very few survive unscathed. In today's Italy, there are protests from civil organizations, NGOs, and victims associations, fighting for transparency, punishment, and justice. But these are tiny voices in the face of the sophisticated machine of organized crime, which establishes its own rules, often stricter and more respected than formal laws. Cases of informers, the famous pentiti, are emblematic. Many opt for snitching to try to save their families, living under protection, isolated from the world, changing identities, which reveals the high personal price of confronting the system. Even so, the culture of silence, omerta, reigns, and most people, out of fear or comfort, prefer not to report it. The Italian ports of Gioia Tauro and Palermo are considered frontiers of global crime. Containers of drugs, weapons, and stolen goods come in and out under the conniving eyes of corrupt customs authorities. Batches of wine and olive oil, the pride of Italian tradition, have also been used to transport drugs and valuables, turning artisanal production into a key piece in the criminal puzzle. In the southern regions, many schools struggle to survive in clan-dominated areas, where courageous teachers teach children to say no to crime, and, for this reason, live under escort and threats. The work of NGOs and cultural projects is vital, as tapping into the artistic potential of young people is seen as a way of getting them out of the cycle of crime. The globalization of crime has brought about unusual alliances. Italian mafias maintain consortia with Mexican and Colombian cartels, buy weapons from Eastern Europe, and establish franchises in Australia, Canada, the USA, and even West Africa, places where once only art and architecture were exported. Even the world of haute cuisine, a national symbol, is not immune. Michelin awarded restaurants have already been closed down for being used for extortion, blackmailing wealthy clients, and money laundering in partnerships with gangs from other countries. Culturally, national icons such as Sophia Loren, Roberto Saviano, writers Andrea Camilleri, and Leonardo Sciascia are examples of public figures who have challenged the history of the mafia and exposed the cruel side of the folklore that still enchants part of the population. Many young people, inspired by cinema and whistleblowing literature, have gone on to form online collectives against systems of corruption, creating mutual support networks and anonymous reporting platforms, a generation committed to the truth. Then there are the women of crime, wives and daughters who were once relegated to secondary roles now act as leaders of operations, controlling companies, clandestine banks, and alliances. This female presence has given rise to new, stricter, and more lethal codes, making the system even more adaptable. Transnational police collaborations, the creation of European databases and operations, like Clean Hands, show the crime has gone global and can only be fought with unprecedented cooperation between countries. In regions such as Sicily and Calabria, religious festivals are used to mark the territorial dominance of mafia families, who parade images of saints accompanied by processions of plainclothes gunmen. Municipal authorities often take part in these events, reinforcing the silent pact between faith, tradition, and criminal power. The involvement of Italian organized crime in major public works has left historical scars. Major roads, dams, subways, and stadiums built in recent decades have had their budgets overpriced by mafia consortia, which have guaranteed fabulous profits by diverting funds from the treasury and compromising the quality of the works. On the outskirts of cities, youth gangs, popular idols on social networks, repeat the behavior and codes of the old mafia families, turning drug trafficking into a lifestyle and a model for advancement. Current documentaries point to the risk of perpetuating this cycle if there are no effective reforms and positive examples from public authorities. and civil society. Dark tourism, excursions to historic mafia cities, visits to famous crime scenes, tastings. In pizzerias controlled by traditional families, generates millions and reinforces the cultural appeal of this dark side, making it even more difficult to combat and reinvent the national narrative. Beyond Italy, descendants of the mafias have migrated, created transatlantic factions, and today influence the economy and politics of major metropolises on 5 continents. Globalization, so celebrated by the formal economy, has also multiplied the power of the underworld from Neapolitan alleys and Sicilian backstreets. In short, modern organized crime in Italy is a 1,000-headed hydra, adaptable, cruel, and extremely profitable. There isn't a family, neighborhood, or sector of the national economy that hasn't been touched, directly or indirectly, by its shadow. But like any empire, its fall will not be the result of an isolated action, but rather the accumulation of small daily acts of courage, denunciations, cultural resistance, education, justice, and international collaboration. Resistance, culture, and the voices of the future. In the heart of a country covered by centuries of culture, power, and mafia, a new movement is beginning to challenge the shadows that seemed eternal. In sunny streets, universities, social networks, and neighborhood collectives, a generation is rising that no longer accepts silence, omerta, or forced coexistence with fear. The final block of the script is dedicated to resistance, hope, and the reinvention of Italy's dramatic and luminous history. The new Italian generation, disenchanted with historical promises and affected by unemployment, migration, and corruption, has decided to confront the tentacles of the old structures with powerful weapons: culture, education, activism, and public denunciation. Cities that were once a symbol of fear, such as Palermo, Naples, and Reggio Calabria, now host student movements, civil rights organizations, and associations of mafia victims. Young lawyers have set up free legal aid offices to protect witnesses and victims' families. University professors are developing curricula that unmask the historical fabric of crime, from primary schools to technical and higher education courses. The impact is immediate. Each student who understands the mechanism of the mafia feels less attracted to the lure of easy power, understanding the high price paid by those who enter the cycle. Did you imagine that the greatest weapon against the mafia would be a notebook, a classroom, and the courage to say enough? On the outskirts of Rome and Naples, NGOs promote the teaching of music, gastronomy, literature, and theater as a means of inspiring children and teenagers. Projects like Libera, founded by Don Luigi Saadi, and Addio Pizzo, challenge the culture of paying bribes by imposing boycott campaigns on companies that collaborate with crime and rewarding those who report it. In public schools in the South, children learn about the real risks of bribery. In the North, debates on ethics and political culture create a bridge between tradition and renewal. The Renaissance of Italian cinema, taking inspiration from the classics but adopting the raw language of today, has been an important vehicle for denunciation. Documentaries, series, and films continue to expose the mafia and its influence, simultaneously educating the public and paying homage to journalists who have lost their lives for the truth. New directors emerge ready to break long, untouchable taboos. Authors like Roberto Saviano have become symbols of the struggle, their literary output serving as a guide for legal and cultural battles. The press, historically threatened by organized crime, is showing signs of revival. Blogs and independent channels offered by young journalists are bringing to light dossiers on political corruption, allegations of bid rigging, and victims' testimonies, providing information that escapes the control of powerful groups. These reporters face hacking, death threats, and censorship, but they have popular support that was previously unimaginable. Behind the scenes of culture, artists and musicians use their art as an instrument of resistance. Subversive graffiti transforms building facades into cries for freedom. Rappers and regional pop singers put complaints into lyrics that go viral on playlists across the country. Independent cultural production, previously marginal, is growing and winning. Important theaters, European festivals, and international awards. Despite the threats, global NGOs collaborate with local movements, funding education, campaigns, training community leaders, and monitoring vulnerable areas to guarantee protection for those who decide to challenge the status quo. Organizations like Ndrangheta Saving Humans, Emergency, and Citizenship are growing, using technology to map risk zones and create emergency relief networks. Values from the past take on new meaning. Responsible tourism, small-scale farming, companies committed to ethics, and campaigns for transparency in public spending. Organic produce fairs in small towns represent the refusal of entire families to feed gangsters with the fruit of their own sweat. In the North, youth cooperatives are redeveloping decaying centers and transforming spaces once dominated by drug trafficking into zones of culture, sustainability, and collective creation. Historically marginalized, Italian women now occupy leadership positions in NGOs, neighborhood collectives, and even multi-million-dollar technology and finance companies, rewriting the female role in the fight against the old criminal patriarchy that dominated the national underworld. Women writers, judges, and politicians face machismo and threats, but they don't stay silent. Cases of policemen and magistrates who refuse bribes, teachers who face threats to denounce school corruption, and small businessmen who defied the parallel market in search of justice are multiplying, showing that the individual example can become a collective wave. In the popular festivals of Palermo, Naples, Bari, and Catania, religiosity takes on a new meaning. Processions once dominated by mafiosi give way to peaceful demonstrations. Placards of denunciation and solidarity events. Past codes of honor are now challenged by young people who have the courage to name their oppressors, testify publicly, and demand justice. Digital initiatives are breathing new life into the struggle. WhatsApp groups connect residents with authorities for quick reports. Alternative transportation apps escape the influence of mafia taxi drivers. Crowdfunding platforms finance complaints, public campaigns, and subsidies for victims of extortion and domestic violence. Soccer, which for decades was an arena for money laundering, violence, and manipulation, now sees clubs committed to transparency, social responsibility, and community action. Institutions are creating sports centers for underprivileged children, replacing the culture of force with that of fair play and solidarity. Organized supporters, once instruments of intimidation, now organize blood donation campaigns, renovate squares, and fight racism. The fruits are already showing. In 2024, rates of extortion and violent crime fell in several major Italian cities. The number of anonymous complaints increased, and public revenue rose after transparency laws were implemented. For the first time in decades, surveys show that young people trust NGOs, teachers, and cultural collectives more than traditional parties. In addition to social and cultural growth, Italy is beginning to excel in ecological initiatives that unite ancient peasant traditions with the technological innovation of green cooperatives. New urban farms are springing up in Naples, Florence, and Turin, transforming rooftops and squares previously dominated by neglect into solidarity gardens and sustainable living spaces. Researchers and young entrepreneurs are investing in clean energy, urban mobility solutions, and water protection in Venice, challenging decades of corruption in public procurement. Hope is finally turning into a national strategy. Newly elected councillors and MPs are bringing in digital transparency platforms, public victim advice platforms, and reforms that encourage whistleblowing, witness protection, and the strengthening of investigative journalism. For the first time since the rise of the mafias, federal crime-fighting bodies have created mixed groups with civil associations, NGOs, and foreign experts. The message from the New Italy is clear. Change takes time, but the cycle of pain is not a life sentence. Every mural, Every lesson on ethics, every complaint, and every small victory makes it impossible to return to the old pact of silence. Where there was once fear and omission, the seed of freedom is now growing. The Italy that the world admires, from the Colosseum to pizza, from the Renaissance to fashion, is finally starting to face its own ghosts. The cycle of fear is increasingly being replaced by the cycle of creativity, culture, and collective commitment. The old empire of shadows resists, but it has never faced a youth so determined to change its own destiny. You are invited to take a fresh look at Italy, not with the eyes of a tourist, but with the open mind of someone who recognizes imperfections and appreciates the courage of those who will never stop fighting for a better country.